Welcome and thank you for purchasing Trigger Explained by Groove 3 and me, your host, Dr. Ford. In this video manual, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about getting started and using Trigger to get professional sounding drums on your productions right away. Available in VST, RTAS, and audio units, Trigger has the ability to take drums that sound like this, and make them sound like this. Or let's say inspiration strikes you while you're walking down the street and you start beatboxing. And within just a few minutes, you can turn it into this. Or even back to this. The options are endless, so let's dig right in. A typical home studio has an 8-input converter, meaning that you can only use 8 microphones on a drum kit at one time to record signal. In this instance, I would have said record a kick, snare over, a snare under, a hi-hat, overhead left, overhead right, and a mic on both the toms. If you had 3 toms instead of 2, go ahead and just delete the snare under and use that mic for the 3rd tom. Because in this case, since we're going to replace the snare, I actually don't need 2 microphones on it. Now, as you can see, I've already gone into the toms and done a bit of drum editing. What I did is essentially manually gated the toms so that no bleeding audio from the rest of the drum kit triggers the plugin when we don't want it to. This is very simple to do. Just go in and anytime you see an actual sound, leave it. Edit out anything that's not a tom sound. Once this is done, we can go ahead and start actually using Trigger. So let's bring up our first set of the plugin. Trigger has a very basic 3-section layout. On the left, we have the settings and instrument browser panel. At the top, we have all of your controls and the display for exactly how you want to trigger the samples. The 3rd section is your actual sample editor. This allows you to mix between multiple cells of samples, change the dynamics and velocity, pan, tune, and really adjust the way your sample plays back. Starting on the instrument browser, you have your settings panel. In the settings panel, Trigger has 2 modes: live, which should be used for literally a live application, and accurate, which is the studio setting. You can set a MIDI input, you can set a filter on what notes to receive via MIDI input, and Trigger can actually trigger other plugins, VST only. At the bottom, you have the instrument and preset path, meaning that every time you start up a brand new instance of Trigger, it automatically defaults to wherever you say. You can have this set to default to the parent browser of your sample library, or go directly to the Slate Digital prepackaged sound bank. It's very simple to do, using the Browse feature and your built-in Finder. The next section is your input meter, your graphic display, your output meter, and the controls for sensitivity, retrigger, and detail. The 3rd section is your sample cells. Trigger has the ability to play back up to 6 stereo drum samples at one time. Each sample cell can read all the common audio file types, such as WAV, AIFF, or MP3 formats, but can also play back multi-layered samples. With 127 different articulations per cell, up to 127 velocity layers per cell, and up to 127 alternating hits per velocity layer, you can make sure that you never hear the same sample twice. Trigger also makes sure that each sample is phase accurate. This guarantees no sample flamming, no comb filtering, and no loss of audio, giving you the perfect blend with just a simple volume control per cell. Now that we have a basic understanding of the layout of Trigger, let's put the plugin in bypass and solo the kick drum. On a mono mic signal, there are 2 ways to instantiate Trigger: mono in, mono out, and mono in stereo out. I chose stereo out because I want to take advantage of the multi-layer stereo sampling. Because of this, Trigger's going to push the mono input audio to the left channel and save the right channel for the leakage suppression input, but we'll cover that later. For now, I just want you to remember Trigger uses the left channel for mono input signal. Now, as you can hear, our original kick drum sounds kind of boxy and doesn't have a very professional quality to it. It definitely needs to be replaced. The best method to start using Trigger is to first get it triggering correctly for your recording and then choose the right sounds and customize them. This way you can audition different sounds in real time with your track and find the perfect blend for your mix. Taking Trigger out of bypass, the kick drum will begin to register on the internal meters. Now, while you can see the kick drum, you can't hear it because we have not yet chosen a sample to replace the original. The other reason there's no audio playback is because Trigger defaults to a 100% wet configuration. If you would like to blend your original signal with the new sample, you have the option of changing the mix, like this. Looking at the frozen screen, the blue waveforms are the original audio, the small orange triangles represent what drum hits Trigger is replacing, and the white horizontal lines dictate what peaks you allow Trigger to replace. Anything between the two white lines will be ignored, just like a noise gate. Anything outside, above, or below the two white lines will get a trigger and an orange triangle. Now let's select a multi-layered sound from the included sound bank. Now all we need to do is fine-tune our drum triggers to work perfectly with our original audio recording. If I hit playback, the first thing you're going to notice is that our kick drum sometimes flams or plays twice in rapid succession. This often happens because the low sonic frequencies of a kick drum have Trigger thinking they're individual hits. To avoid this, Trigger has a built-in high-pass filter on the input line, so the kick drum can be triggered from the sound of the stick or the upper range of the EQ instead of on the lower body of the drum kick. Simply roll on the high-pass filter until the flaming goes away. It usually happens around 100 Hz. If you're still getting a double triggering, you can adjust the re-trigger knob. This limits Trigger's ability to play the next sample by anything less than the amount stated on the knob. I recommend about 50 milliseconds, but you'll need to customize this to your recording. Since you just used a high-pass filter on the input of the plugin, we'll now need to adjust the input volume on the fader to the left. If you want to blend your original recording with these new triggered samples, simply adjust the mix control, like a crossfader, to get your desired sound, and then adjust the output control to taste. The detail knob is like setting a noise gate on your track. Trigger will avoid any peaks that happen between the detail lines, represented by the horizontal white bars in the display. You will want to set this based on what the drum is doing, so note that this knob can be automated, allowing you to set different heights for different sections of the song. In this example, I used the mix control to begin hearing the original alongside the replaced kick. That way I could make sure I was using the right amount of detail to capture all the kick drums and none of the snare. Now that the detail level is set, the sensitivity knob allows us to control the engine sensitivity level. Use lower values to avoid triggering unwanted leakage from the other drums bleeding into your microphone, and use higher values to trigger something very complex, like a low volume, really quick drum roll. I find that most of the time I can leave this knob set to 40, the default, without any problem. Now that you've set your drum triggering engine, you can begin to customize your sound. Because we picked a kick drum from the new deluxe library, Trigger preloaded 4 separate sample cells for us to blend. Each sample cell comes with all the same control you expect to find in any drum machine. For mixing, you have a volume fader, pan and tuning, and for customizing sounds, you have attack, sustain, and release. To best show you these functions, I'm going to momentarily switch to an 808 style kick drum from my personal sound library. Looking at the volume envelope display, Trigger gives you a visual representation of how you have the attack, sustain, and release faders set. As we adjust each one, take a moment to familiarize yourself with what the fader is doing to the sound. The attack fader tells trigger to create a volume swell or a fade in, as represented in the display. The sustain fader tells trigger how long a sound should hold before the decay begins. At 100%, trigger allows each sample to decay as they do naturally, but you can adjust the length of each note to become shorter if you wish by lowering the fader. The release fader controls the tail of the kick drum. If your sample has too much room sound, reverb, or you want it to feel a little bit punchier, lower the release to get a faster decay curve. At this point, we've completed the tour of the first two sections of Trigger's interface. In the next video, we'll cover how to use the leakage suppression system, and we'll begin applying this to our mix. Then, I'll show you how I did the beatbox trick. So stick around for video 2 of Groove 3's Trigger Explained, with me, your host, Dr. Ford.